Good morning. All right, we have our next talk, Fancy Pants AI Things, that are a little bit intimidating, but Felix is going to make them very approachable. We just spoke, he's a NeosCon veteran. This is his 5th NeosCon, but his first talk, so be kind, because it's very scary to be up here. And he also told you a guilty little pleasure of his.
It's very interesting. He loves accounting.
Who loves accounting? Felix, that's who. You're not alone. All right, Felix, take it away. Come up stage. We are ready to be taught your ways. And we're very excited to hear what you've got to tell us.
I'm also excited for my first talk.
Yeah. We are too.
Ask your questions.
Yeah. Good morning, Neos community. Welcome to my talk about large language models and how you actually can use them in Neos. And I would like to start with some questions to you, like who in here is using ChatGPT already, like frequently? Many hands. Who in here is actually using an LLM-based, like a ChatGPT-based automation in production? One hand. 2, 1.5 hands. And who in here is actually planning to implement AI automation in production in the next few months? A few more hands. Yeah, very nice to see that. Because nowadays, I mean, we had already in the introduction, like it's AI and LLM is a very interesting topic that's being spoken about a lot in the last 2 years now. And I'm really happy that I can give you an overview about this amazing topic today. And let's start with the fact that actually like this field is not entirely new. Like artificial intelligence and model training that exists for quite some time. There are like numerous experts who specialized in like model training and machine learning and so on. But using foundation model LLMs, implementing them is an entirely new field. And that's just because this category of models has only been available to the public for the last 2 years now. I mean, everybody knows it when this ChatGPT came up. You know when it happened. It's not that long ago. And that means that there are like no experts about LLM implementation application. And you just saw in the history of the last year how much that has evolved, and it's still evolving. And I want to start also with a quick introduction of our team. So we have Daniel, Roland, and me. And together, like we spent many thousand hours like diving into LLMs and generative AI. And we also advised already many companies, like from small companies to big companies with multi-millions in revenue, with international focus and so on. And also we developed AI tools that they're currently using in production and that they're really, really happy with. And some of our projects, forgot the bullet points, yeah. And some of our projects, they even won awards, like our sidekick won the Drupal Best Solution Award in 2023. And as you can see, the whole ride was quite funny. And it still amazes us every day what we can do with this new technology. And this is why I want to share some of our findings with you today. And this is an enormous topic, and there are like many rabbit holes that you can go down. So let me make it easy for you. Let's break it down into 3 big topics. And the first one is vision and future. This topic is all about like what can future models bring, like what can future software change. And it's most about what you read in the news, like what can work and what is coming up. Also about how objective function, like how can we train models to they're optimized for other use cases and so on. We're not going to dive into this topic. And the second topic, also we're not going to dive into this too much today, is the scientific side of it, which is like all about like university research, writing papers, finding out how models can be 10 times smaller and still perform at the same rate, about how models can take an infinite number of input variables and so on. But what you want to focus on today is the application side of it. Like, what can current models do, what they're capable of doing, and how you can actually implement them. And it's like a lot about figuring out, and we did it for the last year. Like, we tried out what works good, what doesn't work so well, and still there's a lot to learn. And I have a very interesting example. It feels a bit like the first days of the internet. Like, I don't know, if people here remember when, I don't know, JavaScript came up first, and you were trying to find out a few first hacky ways. You were debugging, using alerts and so on. And this feels like this all over again. There's a new technology, and you're trying to find out what works and how does stuff work. So yeah, today I'm going to show you some strategies how you can actually implement AI. And the agenda looks like this. First, I'm going to show you some concepts, how to think about LLMs. It's very important. Like, I talked to many people in the last 2 days here. It's very important how you think about these LLMs to actually come to a good use case. Then I'm going to show you how you can further develop from prompting actually to getting working automations that actually work in production that can be used. I'm going to go over some pitfalls that you might want to avoid, and finally I'm also going to show you a Neos implementation example. But first, let's dive into the concepts. Like, how should you think about LLMs? And my colleague Roland had a very good quote on that. Like, an LLM is a collection of examples of human thinking. Like, you should know it's not necessarily a knowledge database, but it learns how humans think about problems. It thinks in abstract concepts. And the thing is, it learned, for example, a lot of writing styles. It learned textbook examples. It learned code examples. Yeah? But it's not a knowledge database per se. And I'm going to show you now an abbreviated example of how this model training looks like, basically. And you will see why it is not a knowledge database. So let's take Facebook's Llama 2 model as an example. What they basically did is they took part of the internet, which was about 10 terabytes of text data. They ran it through the data centers, and they came out with a file that was 140 gigabytes, yeah? Which is roughly 1% of the initial input data. So you can already see that there is content getting lost in that process. And that means the model is forced to think in abstract concepts. This is not a problem for us, but actually that's really, really helpful. Another quote from Andrej Karpathy. He was like an AI director at Tesla, and he also worked at OpenAI. He said, base models learn powerful general representation unsupervised learnings. Powerful general representations. And I also attached the source, and you can download the slides later if you want to dive deeper into this topic. And this also means an LLM it's not just, you should not see it as a stochastic parrot that only guesses the next word. Some media say that, and it might even be technically correct, but it's not a good way to think about it. And actually, a very good way to think about it comes out of psychology from Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Who in this room knows this literature? Yeah. So what Kahneman explained is that there is like a system 1 thinking and a system 2 thinking with us humans. Yeah? The system 1 thinking is very intuitive and fast, and the system 2 thinking is like slower. It's like you really have to think about stuff. An example for that would be like if I ask you what is 2 plus 2, you're not computing that in your brain. you know it right away. You have memorized it. But if I ask you, what's 17 times 24, you will have to compute that. You don't know that right away. And models, these LLM models, they act intuitive. They're in a system one thinking. They might not be factually correct, but they are very fast, and they come up with very, very good results already for our use cases. Because intuition is good enough for thousands of decisions every day, if you're honest. You can automate things that take a lot of time and that are annoying for us, and where we also become, as humans, error-prone if we do them for a longer time and repeatedly. I mean, just think about, you have a document with 10 pages of a German text, and you have to change it from informal to formal, like from do to see. On the second page, you're already probably you're starting to miss one or two occasions. An LLM is more reliable doing that than you. And also, honestly, we have better things to do with our time than working through a 10-page document. Another way how to break it down, and we're going to go into application now, is like to see like the free application fields where we can use LLM models with this system one thinking. One of them is creativity. And you might know that problem all too well. Like, imagine you have to think about a new product name, but your mind is stuck. And one easy way is you go to ChatGPT and you tell him, hey, like roughly what you want to do, and he's going to give you a few examples. They might not be correct, and you might not be using them immediately, even though the output is already great, but it gives you a head start, where you can, like a pointer where you can start thinking on your own. A second application field is co-piloting, and I actually like to call them junior co-pilots because they majorly do very simple things. But these simple things already make our life much easier. It's, for example, very easy if you already have a draft for important email and you just have to work over it and change it a bit here and there, rather than writing the draft yourself. It's true. But the field that I want to go in today is actually automation. This is where we did numerous of projects in the last years, and where you really can see how you can where you can find solutions for your everyday work. Let's start with an example here. Imagine someone asks you, like, you should write an essay for topic X from start to finish in one go without using the delete key. It's, for a human, it is almost impossible. ChatGPT can do that, and the output is already quite good, but it's not the most efficient way, if you're honest. But what you can do to make it easier for ChatGPT is to break it down into a workflow. So you can tell him, just as we humans, so you should always think like, how are we humans approaching that problem? And tell him this workflow. For example, what are we doing about this essay? We are writing a content outline first. Then we do some research, we revise the content outline, we write the first draft, we critique the draft, and then we revise the draft again. And if you tell this to your LLM, the output will be much, much better. And we actually have a practice example here. So for a big media house in Austria, we wrote an article summarizer. So they have like thousands of articles every month, and summarizing them by hand is a very tedious task. And the way we approach it is, we first told the LLM how it should act. You know, like the LLM, most of the content on the internet is pretty average, and if we steer the model into an area where it's at its highest quality by telling him, you're the world's best journalist and you work for a major news platform, like in our case, we wrote the name of the company, obviously, yeah. Then in a second step, it was very important to our customer that the summary is very fact-driven and it contains figures, and that it's not emotional. So we also tell him like, okay, these are our values. Like this is how you should go about this this summary. And finally, I'm gonna go into detail on the next slide here. We also told him like how to approach it. So in our case, the workflow went like this. We told him like, identify 5 to 10 key points from the article, collect the most important figures from the article, then create a summary, and we also told him like which writing styles to use. Also, we gave him a few very good examples of how article summaries look like. And eventually we told him like to actually check all of the facts and quotes if they are correct. I also put here some further reading for you. And this brings us to a final output where we like do summaries for articles, thousands of them every month, and our customer is really, really happy with the results. And imagine like how many like people you would need for that to summarize articles. And we automated it, and the result is amazing. So to wrap it up a bit, how can you come from just having plain prompts to like having working automations? So if possible, you should use a fixed workflow. If you tell your LLM how it should go about solving a task, you will have more testable and more reliable output. Then what you should also do is obviously develop your prompts iteratively. Like have a first draft for the prompt, test it, see what comes out. Actually, I even have a graph here. Quite simple, but you first have your idea, then you test it with some different content, you find out where are the pain points, you revise it again. And this is another detail. I'm not going to go into this topic too much, but there's also like if workflows aren't enough, you can also use agentic reasoning design patterns, just to have mentioned that here. And if you want to go further, like if you're still not happy with the result, what you can also use are some other techniques. Two of them which are very reliable are, one of them is reflection. So you can have then a second call to your LLM where you basically send him his output from the first call and say, hey, just critique your own text, like revise it again. A second, a very reliable extension of this would be like tool use. You can tell the LLM which tools it can use. One of the best examples is ChatGPT can use the Bing's web search. And the cool thing about that is that you tell him which tools it can use, but it decides on its own if he needs the tools. So, but the big advantage is that you are like defining what it can use. Yeah? Then we have some experimental stuff like planning that would be a bit like going a step back from the workflow approach and telling just ChatGPT, okay, find a way of solving this task on your own. It comes up with good workflows already. However, if the task is very complicated, you might end up with not so reliable results because it might take a different approach every time. And another cool thing, which is still experimental, but it can be very, very amazing in the future, is called multi-agent collaboration. So there are platforms where you can have like different AI models talk to each other and solve tasks together. As I said, it's experimental right now. It can do very, very amazing stuff, but the output is not very reliable yet. So just remember it and come back to it in some time. And finally, two things that are currently not really possible with LLMs. There's one is a future simulations. So LLMs have a hard time imagining what the consequences of their own actions would be. And finally, also self-optimizing loops. So LLMs are trained in order to produce output that is rated as good by humans. So that means it's always like on a level of an average human. currently they cannot excel from this boundary. In the future, they will be able to do that most probably, but currently they cannot do that. And finally, I have some common pitfalls for you that you should be aware when you implement AI solutions. The first one, and it's also a very general topic, is like let's do AI, but what does actually the user want to do? You should always think like, what's the pain point or what's the task to be solved before you say, okay, oh, we're gonna do that with AI. You should just think, what can we already solve with current software that exists, with code, and think about how AI can enhance that before just saying like, okay, let's do it with AI. So be very careful about that too. Always think like, what is the task? The second point is like, so you might say like, yeah, let's build a chatbot. And that might be nice, but oftentimes a chatbot is not the best UI, especially when you have a specific task. Like, let's take our article summarizer, for example. If the task is to summarize an article, what you want to have is basically a form with one field where you put the content of the article, and then you have an output field. You don't want to have like an open chat where you just say, oh yeah, I have this article here, please summarize it for me, like from the viewpoint of the user. And it will also lead me to another point later when it comes to ensuring input safety. And another pitfall that you should be aware of is like thinking that LLMs are just magic and you should trust them completely, and that's obviously not true. One thing that you should always do is like when you write your prompts, when you write your workflows, you should always have like test cases that should, under normal circumstances, not bring any like reasonable result. Like you should test it with some unsolvable cases and see if the LLM actually acts correctly on that. If the LLM actually tells you, okay, I cannot solve that. Because what could happen is that the LLM starts hallucinating, and you need to find a way how to like find out when it's hallucinating. So always be aware of that. Have test cases that are unsolvable. Then another pitfall is to think that LLMs are safe with arbitrary inputs. I already said it with the chatbot example. Like there were like cases where companies made solutions based on an LLM, and they got jailbroken very easily. So the main takeaway here is like, if you can't trust the input, you can't trust the output. So always make sure to have a user interface where you already mitigate those problems. Like also when you engineer the prompt, you should be aware of how can you prevent malicious content from actually like producing output that's unwanted. And finally, and I think that it's a very important point to say, thinking that AI is too expensive or not reliable enough. It's not true. And also the models, they are getting cheaper and they're getting more reliable every day. And the most important thing is like, if you have a use case where you think, okay, AI might be a good solution, then start acting on it now, because it also takes time until your internal project is ready for production. And by the time, models have already evolved. So if you say, no, I'm gonna wait for GPT-5 or whatever, you're just like pushing it away, and you forget that it also takes you time to develop the solution finally. Yeah. But finally, let's talk about like a simple example how you can actually use it in Neos. And one example that I brought is meta description generator. You know, like your editors, they enjoy to write new content, but maintaining the meta descriptions, that's something that they often hate. So let's automate that. And let's start let's start the way how we started with the article summarizer. We gave him a personality. We tell him like, you're a world-class writer and SEO expert. Like you follow all the best practices and create incredible meta descriptions. By the way, we already have evolved that prompt. The slides are not 100% up to date here, but it's just to give you the idea. And then we design a workflow. We gather the information that we need. I mean, what do we need? We get the page title, first of all. Then we try to get the page content and transform the HTML into plain text. That's a bit important, that LLMs have currently a hard time understanding large amounts of HTML. Also in our projects, what we use instead of plain text is actually Markdown, but I wanted to keep it simple for you here. And then you let the AI create the first meta description, and finally you also validate if the length is not more than 160 characters, because that's the limit for a meta description. And yeah, I also brought a tiny code example. I'm just saying it's abbreviated, but let's start with a method here that it can be either called in a signal, you know, like after node publish, or it can be called like every night in a command controller. Yeah? This is just the service method. And it gets the document node and it gets a controller context so that we can build the public URI to the site. And what we do first is we just get the title. I decided to just go for the title property here, and you can, of course, have any kinds of fallbacks and use any other property, but I think you know that, obviously. Next, what I did, a very simple implementation of how I could get the page content would be I create a public URI, and then I use file get contents. That is the simplest approach I could find. Also here, feel free to use whatever better implementation for this. And I strip the tags. I have my prompt. I fill it with the title and the text content. And so, where's my loop? Here's my loop. Yeah, I also abbreviated that a bit. Then I'm just calling OpenAI, and I did like this. If it's more than 160 characters, we just retry until we get a meta description that's less than 160 characters. You should maybe also have like a retry count. Yeah? But if you find bugs in here, you can either keep them or you can make a pull request. And yeah, finally you set the property to a node. And that would be already a very simple example. And everybody knows it, like maintaining SEO properties like meta descriptions, that's really, really a pain. But if you can automate that, it's much more fun. So, finally, very important, and I said it before, like, be curious about this topic. Like, you don't see which companies are already doing AI stuff under the hood until they actually get public. And if you say now, nah, I'm gonna wait for the next model, in a few months you might end up seeing, oh, and they are doing AI, and they are doing AI. Just remember, like, Google and Microsoft, like OpenAI, they already announced they're gonna invest huge amounts of money into AI. So it's gonna get better, and it's gonna get cheaper and more reliable. And the best thing you can do is just start. But how can you start? And I brought you some questions that will help you think of some use cases. 2 questions here, like, think of some tedious and boring and time-consuming tasks. I don't know, going through all of the node documents and updating the meta description, for example. Yeah? Or what do you avoid just because it's too exhausting? Learning Neos? What? Yeah. So I'm already looking forward to your talk next year about how you can enhance learning Neos with AI. Yeah, example. Or talk to people. Yeah. Or and I also have a good example here, like, well, like which data would you not touch, like, because it's just too big. And we also did a very amazing project last year with a international food delivery company. They was like active in Germany and Austria. So what they have is like they have like 50,000 products in their web shop, and they needed to find out in which product description in which of the product descriptions they had like falsy health claims. It's a big issue, because if you get fined for that, that's about like 10,000 euros just for one case. If they find you having like falsy falsche Gesundheitsversprechen in a product description. So we wrote an automation that was reading through all of those product descriptions, and it was like evaluating, is there a falsy health claim, and if there was one, it also rewrote the product description in a way so that it was not there anymore. And it's the reason why it's a very interesting case is because you couldn't possibly hire enough people to go through 50,000 product descriptions manually. I mean, imagine how much that would cost. And we just automated that. So let's say that the options are like, you cannot hire so many people because it's just virtually too expensive. So you're left with two options, either with our AI automation, which was doing an amazing job and the customer is really, really happy with that, or being at risk of getting a fine, which is like 10,000 euros per case or more. And obviously, and that's a very important point. The AI solution, it is reliable enough to protect you from stuff like that. Even if it reduces the amount of potential lawsuits that you get, you already save money. Yeah, that's the example that I just brought. Or like going, I don't know, through hundreds of contracts and finding out what your termination clauses are. And one of the last questions is like what would you do if you had 100 junior employees? Just think, what task would you give them? And then think, okay, maybe this task would be good in the hands of an AI automation. Yes, and that's just the beginning. Let's build the future together. And I know that the Neos community is always super curious about new technologies, and let's start doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Felix. All right, I'm not texting and or reading or looking at pictures with my dog. We have a lot of questions, which is great because you were quick with your talk. So we have, Jesus Christ, more time for questions.
Well, let me get rid of those.
Thank you.
Presents first.
Thank you very much.
For you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have an AI-generated question. Do you want that one first?
Of course.
How can large language models be utilized to enhance the new event-sourced content repository in Neos CMS for more efficient content retrieval and management?
Can you say the last part again?
It's right here.
Good question. Try it out, honestly.
But one thing that you said clearly pushed a button because you talked about unsolvable cases.
Yeah.
And there's at least 2, maybe 3 questions about what's a good example for an unsolvable input, or what was the most interesting unsolvable case you posed to an LLM, and what was the outcome?
That I actually don't really recall. I mean, in a very simple term, it's like imagine you have like a computation and I don't know, make a division by 0. I mean, that's a very simple example. Probably a bit.
What does the large language model respond when you ask it to divide by 0?
I don't remember that actually. Maybe I was a bit too excited now, but yeah. But I mean, it really depends on the context. It can't be really answered just like that. Depends on what you want to do, what your content is actually, and then you have to define for yourself what's what's an unsolvable case or what's like actually an invalid output for you. That's what you have to like find out for your task then.
I thought it was very comforting that large language models also hallucinate, and it's not just me.
Yeah.
Next question. This is maybe very useful. When you break down a task in a workflow for the LLM, do you send it to the LLM in one prompt, or do you break it down step by step?
It depends. Usually you can do it in one prompt too, except for this additional techniques that I was showing on the one slide, like with the 3 categories. For example, the reflection. The reflection would be like a second call. But you can send it in one prompt. You're saying, hey, I have this article here with this content. I want a summary. You're like a world-class journalist. You're writing in this style and so on. You just give it all of that, and he actually can make do with that in one call. Yeah.
How do you handle data protection concerns?
I mean, data protection. How do you mean, like in input terms or?
Who asked the question? Nobody.
Nobody.
If it was my question,
Yeah.
and it's being cut off, it was how do you handle data protection concerns in terms of when you build the tool and you don't necessarily know which content the editor is maybe going to put in. How do you restrict the chance that that you send internal data to, for example, ChatGPT? Do you use internal models, or do you try to obfuscate data that you know shouldn't go externally?
Let me just repeat that for the audience and live stream. So more or less, how do you protect the data, the input, like no internal data being sent to the GPT?
That also like depends on the case. Like we didn't really have the problem because the product, for example, let's take the case with the product descriptions that we were like checking for faulty health claims. That for example, is public information. Yeah.
But you had before,
yeah.
the example you had before with contracts, for example. Find me here
The contract example he's mentioning.
I mean, there was rather an idea, but hard to say actually.
All right, I have one last very practical question. Where can we find the slides to follow the links that you have for us?
On the QR code that actually you removed with this slide.
That we're hiding.
This one, yeah. So feel free to like scan the QR code, and you can get the whole slides. Yes.
Thank you so much, Felix.
Yeah.
Another round of applause.
Thank you.